But on to Russ with something to say.
Well, yesterday, something big happened. LeBron James broke the all-time scoring record for the NBA, but I had to point this out. I'm sorry. I'm going to be the guy to point this out. Like, I'm not even going to debate LeBron and Michael Jordan because I don't think it's much of a debate. But if you want to save that one for another day, that's fine. But I would debate LeBron against Kareem because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had the most unstoppable shot in NBA history. I've really had nobody argue with me against that. Like, if you wanted to get one basket in the game and you had Magic Johnson on the floor, he would get it to Kareem and you were going to lose the game. Like, that's just the way it was. But if you actually look at numbers, the first number that really stands out is LeBron James has 2,237 points from three-pointers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had 3. 3. So there's a disparity there. Then the next thing I looked at was field goal percentage. And for 2-point field goal percentage, LeBron James is at 54% and Kareem is at 56%. So, yes, with the game, the way the game is, with nobody hanging on you like they used to on Kareem and elbowing you and everything else, yes, LeBron James is the all-time scoring leader and will add to that, and maybe nobody breaks it. But I do have to point out it was harder for Kareem to do it. It really was.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I driving home from the game last night, I got, late night, sports radio, which, you always, you know what you get at late night sports radio. And the guy that was the host, and I couldn't even tell you his name because it was a national program. It just irritated him that people wanted to debate where LeBron James fit in the pantheon of heroes. He goes, we're not even talking about that. He said, LeBron James himself. He said, so we're going to take the man at his word. He said, there's no reason to debate. It's like, I'm not a natural scorer. I never was. He has great respect from his other guys. So, LeBron, if LeBron doesn't want to do it, if he says, yeah, I lose. Like, why does anybody else? Like, the guy just said, let's just celebrate LeBron for what he was, which is an exceptional, great player who,
he's a great player.
He goes, if you want to debate it because it's fun, he goes, I'm fine with that. But don't get on here and start telling me about who's better and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that didn't stop anybody. They all came on and, they're armed with statistics and what Kareem would do if it was, if he was in the 3-point era, and the training would have been different, which is what I always say. And, in this era, Kareem would have been a better player.
Oh yeah.
You would think, Kev, that this is something that I'm interested in debating. I don't think it's a debate. So it's like, I think Jordan is the best of all time. I think there's no doubt. Just like I think Bobby Orr is the best of all time in hockey. It's completely subjective. You don't have to, I could be wrong, but that's it. It is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think the modern development of the Pantheon has really kind of helped it a little bit, because I think it's a little bit easier to determine top 3 or 4 without, and you can get kind of a consensus on that. Not always perfectly, but certainly in hockey you can.
Yeah, it's the Mount Rushmore thing now, that everybody who's on the Mount Rushmore of hockey.
Yeah.
Or basketball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Mount Rushmore. So
we'll argue about that during the summer.
Right. when we're pulling subjects to talk about out of our.
I have a topic like this on Friday for hockey that you guys are gonna like. So.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, I would say LeBron and Kareem are comparable in terms of their sense of their perception of injustice.
They're locked up on that.
Both of them, neither one of them are afraid to speak publicly.
No,
which is great. Yeah, and both are, I think, equally kind of like famous. I would say the fame is.
Yeah, I think they are actually, because
it's hard to say Kareem is such a big famous person, right? But LeBron is also there.
Kareem did a couple movies that were very popular. He did the Bruce Lee movie, he did the Airplane movie. So, that did add to his fame, no question.
Yeah.
I think LeBron, you would say, is more popular just because, Kareem's career didn't happen during the era of social media.
Yeah, and I wouldn't
But
argue.
that's the only reason I would say that.
Yeah,
So,
I wouldn't argue.
Although I have to say this, if anybody actually thinks that LeBron James works out with that tonal thing, the thing that's strapped to a wall, my butt. There's no that's the line in his pocketbooks. He doesn't even have one of those in his garage.
And
Well,
you
yeah,
wonder why a guy
Tiger
like that
Woods
would
drove
have-
a Buick too, if you believe it. So,
why a guy like that would have to line his pocketbooks, like.
but they do, Eck.
I always wonder why guys like that are making $40-50 million a year take on a product endorsement.
Because they can make more.
Right. You
I
never
know,
want to stop making money. Ash.
yeah, the reason they make $40 and $50 million a year is because they take on all those things.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, he's a great basketball player. Yeah.
You always ask rich people, why you watch every last penny.
Oh, that's true.
And,
I mean, Eck, maybe
that's
you
why
can
I
get a
got
flannel
this
shirt.
amount of money
Maybe
because
you can get a flannel shirt sponsorship, Eck.
Yeah, thrift shop, everything we're wearing right now is quite a thrift shop.
Beck is the secret sixth member of Pearl Jam.
That was nothing but thrift shop clothing. Anyway, here we go. All right, let's go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, February 8th, 2023.
Oh,
I'm Michael Lagello, and I'm thankful that hockey is back on TV because it prevented me from having to watch 1 minute of the State of the Union.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I definitively know what year I'm in.
I'm Kevin Allen. I never know what to say.
Does it matter? I mean, does it really matter?
Does it matter? It kind of matters.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, the check it matters, but does it really matter? Be like, I don't know.
I quote the famous band Chicago from my era. Does anybody really know what time it is?
Does anybody even care?
Does anybody really care?
Anybody even care?
Time.
I'm going with you at 100%. Honestly,
Are you with me on that, Eck?
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, all right then.
You
I'm
know
with
me.
you.
I'm the guy who's like just another time around the sun every time I have a birthday. I think it's ridiculous. I think New Year's Eve should be at 6 p.m. at night. There's no reason why it wouldn't be why we can't start the new day. The new day, in my opinion, wouldn't it be great if the new day started at 6 p.m. every night? Like that was when the new day began. So you're at work on Wednesday, you get home, and it's Thursday.
Well,
No, that would be terrible.
you can just go ahead and celebrate like Sweden's New Year's Eve.
Right.
Like at 6 o'clock,
Yeah.
it's midnight in Sweden. So.
I think it would be really fun to have like the beginning of every day.
Maybe
be
it's
the
10
night-
o'clock. I can move it to 10 o'clock, and I'd be okay.
Okay, there you go. Anyway, oh man, people in the chat.
That should be an ongoing skit. My pet peeve of the day. Then we have a show.
I really have started to embrace with the idea that you watch sports to find one thing every night that can make you mad. It never occurred to me before, but a week ago when the light bulb went on, I just thought that's what happens. I mean, that's the only explanation for why you would watch anything from All-Star Weekend. Like I'm with you. I don't actually. It's not my cup of tea. But I simply don't watch. But you do watch. I
didn't watch the game. I watched the skills.
Even so, you don't like that.
In the Hall of Fame, Kevin. We have to still watch the All-Star game. Like it's our job.
No, I don't. I don't have to watch that.
You don't have to. That's what I'm saying. You're good.
No, I don't.
We have to.
I covered a lot of them, and I had a hard time making them interesting.
And you know that we still need to watch it. Like, and you know that that's where we're at, and that's okay because
I am the governor.
Where we were at, you did it too. You had to do it too.
I am the governor of grievance. But continue.
Look, I'll give you this. I'll even tell you this. I had an opportunity to get paid to cover the All-Star game, and I could have done it. The timing would have been very tight because I was doing something else that day, and I decided I don't know if I can get 500 words out of this, so I didn't do it.
Lewis Black is darn funny.
He's great.
I saw him in concert. For those of us who that's just popped up on our
here
we go. This is the fight.
I'm going more with Oscar the Grouch than Lewis Black because Lewis Black is just funny, and I almost, as hard as it is to admit this, I almost agree with everything he complains about.
Yeah.
So I just think hard about we were talking the other day. Anyway, I don't want to go into this too much. Anyway, let's move on. I don't want to worry. Going into the deep psyche of Mike is not where we are.
I've got a trade to announce, so
Okay.
Not a real one, but in Mike's fake world.
Oh yeah,
which I love.
They're going to play that game for sure. Let's first talk about let's see, Mike.
Do we want to talk about the new head of the NHLPA, who apparently was the designated survivor yesterday? He was the former Department of Labor Secretary Marty Walsh is going to be the new NHLPA director, Kev. And I mean, his name sort of popped out there last week as somebody. And I mean, we don't know what the direction of the PA will be under Walsh as opposed to Donald Fear, but I mean, it is significant that we have a new head and that'll be a new dynamic going forward.
This is not the other Walsh. Let's just say that.
Well, yes, but one thing was I heard the name Walsh and thought, oh,
that's what I thought too originally. I don't know how many people find this interesting or not out there, but
I'm getting a message that my computer's going to blow up in 4 minutes if I don't plug in. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back with you.
Why don't you do that? Yeah, because the NHLPA, I don't know, maybe it's just because of time covering the lockouts and stuff like that. It just makes me cringe, Mike. But they have it's all about relationships, right? They have to set up a relationship with this guy. Obviously, it's about relationships, and
I mean, it's not sexy, but I'm saying it is something that down the line we'll have to factor in because the head of the PA is going to be, we don't know what's going to happen in a few years when the CBA expires and how, because Fear did seem to have a good working relationship with Bettman in the NHL. And there are some people in the rank and file of the PA who believe that that the players got taken to the cleaners under Donald Fear, which Russ, I mean, that goes I know, but that goes counter to a lot of the stuff that happened under Donald Fear when it came to baseball. But that's the perception about.
No, I know, but there are always going to be misinformed people in the world. Yes. And misinformed people in the world would think that Donald Fear didn't make money for the players. Look, I wrote my first published book was called Strike Three. It had a lot to do with Donald Fear and a player, Nico Riesgo, who I do some podcasting with, but also had a lot of dealings with Donald Fear because he wanted to learn about that business. Donald Fear was the second best ever. Marvin Miller was definitely the best. Donald Fear was the second best. When the players asked Donald Fear, who was already retired, to come in there, he really did do it because he felt like they were being underserved and wanted to get them better money, better conditions, all of it. And he did. He pulled that off. You could not like the way he went about it. You could not like the way, but he's always was available. He interviewed all the time. He always made his points. And that's what you want to do. Now, this new guy, I don't know him. I know he's part of the Biden cabinet. He just left that. And I do know that he had a fundraiser when he was running for mayor at TD Garden. And I do know that Jeremy Jacobs donated $13,000 to it. That I do know. I don't know if that matters. It might. And so I think that's going to be written and talked about more than what Donald Fear did, to be honest.
Yeah, what I would say about all that, I mostly I want to just echo what Russ said because we don't know anything about him, so we just don't know what his negotiating positions will be. Right. We don't know, what his negotiating style. But what I would say about Donald Fear is what we learned about Donald Fear, and I think this, it's hard to be a peacetime general if you've been a successful general at war. Not everybody can do it. Bob Goodenow was not a good peacetime general, but he was a great wartime general. He was bold, and he changed the landscape for players. Salary disclosure and everything else. And I think the legacy is, there hasn't really been reason to fight as hard. Like I think people are misreading Donald Fear saying, he just really didn't, like if there had been time for war, in recent years, like I think he would have been up to the challenge. Yeah. But I just think, players, haven't suffered like people thought they might in a salary cap world. Now, are they making less money? For sure. I mean, there's been a cap on the star players, both literally and figuratively. So they haven't gotten, nearly as much. And I know a lot of agents would like to see, obviously would have seen luxury tax because, you'd have great spending from the Rangers and the Maple Leafs and so forth. So I don't know. I mean, with all the good that Donald Fear did for the baseball players, I don't think he forgot, what to do when he was in the NHL. I think
here's a key thing. I looked it up, Kev, because I was thinking about it. So in 2011, Donald Fear came out and challenged the NHL and Gary Bettman on their calculations for hockey-related revenue. This was something the players had been losing money on hand over fist for years and years and years. Couldn't do anything about it. He comes in, he challenges it. He did make it better. Like, that was a big thing. That was let go
I got something.
every other time.
And that's a simple, basically. And to me, the biggest thing Donald Fear had was his reputation. And to me, and that played on both sides. The NHL wasn't going to try to sneak something past him because he was Donald Fear. And the NHL, the players knew that he wasn't going to have something stuck past them because he was Donald Fear. So in a lot of ways, that calmed down everybody. It kept the NHL honest, where they weren't going to be able, let's just make this offer because we'll eventually get to this offer,
right? Which
is usual negotiations. That's normally where they go. With Donald Fear, they couldn't make that offer to get to this offer. They had to make this offer to get to this offer. It had to be a little bit. They knew because that offer would send Fear into war mode, and they didn't want Donald Fear in war mode. So his reputation, I think, kept everything flowing in a lot of ways.
He even challenged the 50-50 split.
Right.
Which you would say on the surface, why would someone challenge a 50-50 split?
Right.
There are reasons. When you dig into it, there are reasons.
There are reasons. And they're both, I'm having, and this was my main job for, when we were in lockout modes a couple times in strike modes, this is like the one thing the owners will always tell you about this thing is the owners the players should deserve their money too, but the players also don't have to pay everybody else when it's not being made. They don't have to pay, the staff in here. They don't have to pay this, when money's not coming in, when tickets aren't being sold. I still have to pay the insurance for everybody and everybody who works in the office, all the people who are putting together the jerseys or whatever, people who are selling things, just accountants, all this stuff. When the players don't play, the owners still have to pay.
I have my own opinions, obviously. I'm usually almost always pro player and all this. I think, they're the game. They deserve to be paid like movie stars. We pay movie stars when we go to their movies, and we need to play the players. But, if you were a Martian and you had a law degree from the University of Mars and you came down here, sports law degree, and you came down here and you looked at this system, a system in which the players get 50%, the owners get 50%, the players are the game, but the owners take the risk. You can't, the guy in Arizona, he's not reaping the benefits from being an owner. He's losing millions of dollars, every year. It doesn't actually work. And there have been other owners who haven't. Now, the value of franchise is going up. But the point of all that is there is, from the outside looking in, a bit of fairness to the system. Split of the revenue, guarantee that the players are going to get that. And they never, one of the things, the misnomer is fans always talk about, they should be partners. The players don't want to be partners because partnership, you have to accept risk.
Right.
They don't want any risk. They want guarantees in their money. So, they
already have their own kind of risk, Kevin, but they have, but
they don't have any risk because their contracts are protected. So, and, their only risk is they might not be as good as they hope they were, or
they get hurt,
they get hurt, but even if they're hurt, their contracts.
As long as they sign.
That's why they hate escrow so much because they're getting 80 cents on the dollar right now for escrow, and they want it eliminated, but you can't eliminate it if you're going to have a 50-50.
Yeah, anybody who owns a house should understand escrow.
Yes,
it's a good debate, and I noticed this has started on Twitter, especially with big market teams. And you could just look at baseball and see that it's failing. But yet in hockey, I see some fans saying, and I saw C-Mac say it in the group here, let's challenge the hard cap. Okay, so if you want to challenge the hard cap and you want to have teams be able to spend, I don't know, $10 million more, I'm going to tell you something. 90% of the teams that are in trouble now will be in trouble with that extra money spent.
Way worse. And also, you can't have guaranteed contracts.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you want to have if you want to have no cap, you can't have guaranteed contracts. And that's
well, just look at, you want to talk about the fairness of it too. Just look at this compared to the NFL when, except for the really big name guys who get, the guaranteed money, But even that, it's just a percentage of, when the guy says he gets $100 million contract, the first question from any good reporter or even a bad reporter is, well, how much is guaranteed? Because it's usually a fraction of the Stars. It's higher.
Right.
It's very high. So they're getting big money. But everybody else, it's not. So in the NHL, you have the buyout in terms of, 2/3, but, you're protected. Once you get that contract, if you got a $60 million contract, under the worst case scenario, you get 2/3 of that. So, so the Martian who has the degree in sports law is going to look and say, if he doesn't know anything about it. Now, saying all that, I get it. I mean, if you want to argue about the luxury tax, all that kind of stuff, yeah, that's fine.
The luxury tax doesn't work.
No, I mean, it doesn't. But I respect people who know a lot about it, who believe that it could work in the NHL. Now, I think our system's working fine, but
you know what will work? I think this is just a guess. If you had the luxury tax in the NHL, I think it would work for 20 teams, and I think you would have about 12 teams it wouldn't work for.
I think a Larry Bird exemption would work in the NHL, where one contract does not count against the cap. I think that you maintain the cap, but then you also, like Austin Matthews wouldn't count against the Leafs cap, or Panarin enough for the Rangers cap.
You want to give teams a free $10 million, then that's what you're saying.
Well,
more teams will not go for that.
I've heard the franchise tag, but I don't really like that in the NFL.
They've weaponized the franchise.
They have weaponized it. I agree. They have weaponized it. That's what I don't like about it.
Yeah, the franchise tag is a way of protecting themselves from having to do a long-term deal. They can lock up a guy for a year,
right?
And then, he's 33 years old and he's not going to be able to earn any money because he gets hurt or something like that. So,
There's
lots of ways to handle it. I mean, I've also heard people argue for the idea that you could trade salary cap itself. And that's
do that right now with retention. So that's not really.
But flat out trade salary cap itself would be an issue.
Yeah. No, I've heard that as well. And I think that's worthy of committee debate. I've never understood why they really haven't, broken out 5 GMs and really got down into it and, tried to figure out because I find that fascinating. I sort of like it, because, imagine like a team like the Coyotes, like right now, they don't want to take on any salaries because they don't want to lose any money because that's real money. I mean, we always talk about that. So, but what if they could just trade their cap space? Imagine
the bidding war. Suddenly, say they're trying to trade their cap space to either Toronto or Boston.
Yeah.
And if both those teams, neither one of those teams wants the other team to get more cap space.
Was against that, and I don't remember the reason why. It was talked about though.
Usually, the reason what I'm saying there is that teams don't want other teams to have more cap space all of a sudden.
It gets talked about every year, but it's never been really studied.
No,
I mean, because right now, $82.5 million per team times 32 teams is $2.64 billion. That doesn't change. That's the max that teams can spend on players. Now, not every team gets to the cap, but the argument here in favor of this is, okay, whatever revenue that what you're paying towards players, that's not going to change if you're trading cap from one team to another. So it doesn't incur any additional financial.
I don't know, Kevin. You know the answer to this question. All right, so say I don't know, just pick a number out of the blue. We are total of there's $25 million of cap space out there. Just pick that number out there. That's not being used, right? $25 million of $2 billion or whatever you want to call it, right? Okay, so let's say it's $2 billion, $25 million out there, and the revenue is $4 billion. I'm just throwing out big numbers just to kind of get an idea here. If it's $4 billion, $2 billion should go to the owners, $2 billion should go to the players. The 50-50 split.
Yeah.
But the $25 million that's not being used, what happens to that? Does it still 50% go to the players? Does that rest of the money get dispersed throughout the players?
Well, the cap doesn't matter. It's the actual revenue that's brought in.
Right.
So even if the cap space isn't used, it doesn't change the revenue that's brought in. They get 50% of the revenue. Whether if for some reason if the owners decided that they were only going to go to 70% of the cap, it wouldn't change what the players would get. The escrow would go the other way. like suddenly the
That's
owners.
the real. So players, when there's more cap space not being spent, players at the end of the year make more money.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right, so here, what if Gary Bettman does this and says, all right, Eck, I like your thing there. We're going to allow trading cap space, but guess what? We have now come up with a list of what a front office should cost around the NHL with scouts and GMs and everything, and this is a cap for that. We now have a hard cap for that too.
Yeah, I mean,
and you're
remember that's uncapped.
Players wouldn't have any problem with that.
Players wouldn't have a problem.
No, but I think some teams would, because like the Canadians who have 35 scouts and the Rangers who have 20 VPs.
Right. That's where the rich big market teams are still having the advantage.
They would have a problem with it.
Yeah. But let me ask Russ. Russ is a scouting guy, and that gets thrown around all the time. Well, they have such an advantage because they've got 10 scouts and Buffalo's only got 3, or Arizona's got 1, or whatever it is. Is it a real advantage?
Well, I'll point out to when Buffalo thought it was a good idea to just use video scouting and pulled everybody in. It was a disaster.
Yeah, I do believe that, but I think you got to have people out there. I also heard
numbers doesn't do it. You still have to have good scouts and the right evaluation.
Well, yeah, that was what was said to me about Buffalo. If Buffalo is not going to do a good job scouting, it doesn't matter if they have 1 or 8.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, it does matter who your scouting director is and
right.
what they're looking for. And what marching orders are.
Point. Like I think under Kevin Adams, like if he said to me, I'm only going to have 3 scouts. Like I'd say, he'd know what he was doing if he had the right guys.
Yeah, the only problem with that is, and the only thing I would bark back against it is having those 3 scouts, but then trying to be able to cover like the World Juniors and 4 of the 5 big tournaments, the under 18s, the Halinka, and still maintain that same level of scouting. You can't do.
There you go. Yeah.
Now,
well, your top scouts go anyway.
Well, but that's the thing. If you have top scouts there, the other teams still have other guys in the other places still going to the other events, the other games consistently, because guys will, again, this is why I always point out to people. There are some players that will get scouted 40, 50 times a year before a team makes a decision on them. Like, because they can. Basically, because they can, because they have the budget, and that matters.
Now,
just one other quick thing, because this is kind of interesting. But I had scouts that have said, like during the pandemic, like nothing changed. Like we didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. We got clipping. We got film, video, and we watched all that. And we weren't any better or any worse because of that. Like we still got the guys.
In a good organization, some didn't want to pay for those extra clippings. I won't say what organizations, but I know Mike has an idea, and I know a few that didn't want to. And you kind of wonder how that did affect them. If you look at the scouting, it kind of did affect them.
Yeah, we're definitely in an era where every game, even down like the Pee Wee hockey level, is being filmed. Like it's like like my friend has a guy who's playing. Is a kid who's like 14 years old, is playing in all these tournaments. I can watch all the games he plays.
Sure.
I love watching. We're at that level too, so that's also changed things quite a bit.
But as Russ knows, there is a difference between watching a game on TV and being at the game. So you have to do your leg work to be able to go over to these tournaments in Europe or go to the KHL or whatever. You can't do it just simply by watching it on clips.
Right?
Yeah, but again, it's still so subjective.
Sure.
No, but there are some areas that are just hard to get to at certain times of the year. So if you talk to scouts and say, hey, when's the cutoff for you for Sudbury? They'll tell you.
Yeah.
Look how sophisticated NHL scouting is now. And this is at the highest it's ever been. 70% in the first round.
If you made it a 19-year-old draft,
yeah.
If you made it a 19-year-old draft, those numbers would change.
Is that even legal, though? Do we know whether a 19-year-old draft is legal?
Why wouldn't it be legal?
It's collectively bargained. So
it's legal.
It's just as legal as an 8-year-old draft if you decide that.
Yeah, but you would have a lot better results. You would.
A couple things before we do our proposed trades. We put this one off for a couple days because it started to get mentioned during the All-Star weekend in Florida, Kev. Nathan McKinnon and Sidney Crosby especially came out and said they were in favor of going back to the conference playoff format. I know John Shannon did a unofficial Twitter poll and had like 75% of fans saying they wanted to go back to a conference playoff format rather than the divisional format. This has long been something that I've thought was inherently unfair because I just don't think the divisional setup works. But do you think that this is something that Gary Bettman will just bury, or will he actually listen to the fans and some players in terms of a change going forward?
I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, I would guess that they would talk. I mean, they talk about it all the time. The general managers have never, as far as I know, have never come close.
Yeah, they have.
Wanted to come back. They like it the way it is. The league has gotten in trouble. We've talked about this before when they've listened to fans. They did a intense survey during the, I've talked about this before. This is how we got here. An intense survey of what people wanted from their playoff teams during the lockout, the lost season. And one of the things they said, hands down, almost 100%, not quite, but they wanted division rivals. We don't want to lose those. We want to play those. We love playoff games against teams we know. They went to that. Of course, everybody's hated it. I'm among those. I would like to see that, although that will not be perfect either. And the reason is, every year you're going to have, like right now, if the playoffs, and I don't think it's true now. I think Colorado might have fallen out. They're either just out or they're in, one or the other. But Dallas, for their success, is going to have to play Colorado.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the way it's worked out, like I think it would be similar on the 1-8 too, just because Colorado has not performed like the team it is, and they would be down, because they're going to be a wild card team either way. I mean, maybe they'll come back strong in the second half, but the point is that isn't going to change. But the one bit major difference is one that Mike laments on, and rightfully so, is that 2 versus 3 in a division is always just ridiculous, because you end up with sometimes with 2 of the better teams, and I don't think that would happen under 1-8.
But I'm not against this system. I always think there's a balance of power change, like every 5 years. Yeah. I think, as an example, if Connor Bedard goes into the Pacific like Craig McTavish wants, then there are going to be teams in 2 years that won't want to be in the Pacific anymore, because they'll be like, well, I got to face McDavid, I got to face Bedard. And Mike is just saying this about Toronto because, they happen to be facing 2 juggernaut.
No, it's not just Toronto and Tampa. It's inherently unfair for everybody.
I haven't heard any other fan base.
Calm down.
I haven't heard any other fan base complaining.
I'm going to defend Mike on this. If you ask the Minnesota Wild, they'll also tell you this system.
St. Louis, Minnesota was inherently unfair last year.
Why was it unfair in Minnesota?
Central Division 2-3 matchup has been every bit as bad as the Atlantic.
No, but why? Who did Minnesota play that it was unfair?
St. Louis.
But why is that unfair? St. Louis
in the second best record in the division.
St. Louis on the scrap heap. St. Louis was on the scrap heap a couple times. Why is it now all of a sudden unfair that they played St. Louis? I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, still in that year, they were the second best team in the conference. I mean,
they weren't always for the whole year. They weren't even for the Stanley Cup year.
The way this is set up, listen, is it leads itself to it can work out well or not, and so can 1 versus 8. That's the problem with this whole thing.
Yes,
the other problem is 1 versus 8. In order for that to honestly be fair, you'd have to play an equal conference schedule.
Well, that's what Gary Bettman has pointed out.
Yeah,
there are issues to it. It could be. I would just like to see it just because it would be something new, and we get other first round matchups that we don't usually get. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't completely eliminate the possibility of a divisional matchup. I mean, if they go to an 84-game schedule, it's 4 games against your own division, 3 games against the other division in your conference, and 2 against the other conference. And right now, Toronto would play Tampa. There would be a 4-5 in a conference format. It doesn't eliminate the possibility.
I think it's going to be hard to get those 84 games. I think the players are going to want a lot.
The reality of it is this right now. We have never had more teams not make the playoffs than we have in the NHL right now. Yeah. Right? We have 16 teams. Like when I started following this league for real, it was like, there were 20 teams.
The big joke was there's 8 teams that don't make it.
Yeah, there were 20 teams in the league, but I remember when there was 20 teams in the league, right? So that's
21.
Yeah, in the early 80s. Yes.
Okay, right. So that's what I remember. 21 teams, and then 5 teams didn't make the playoffs.
5 didn't make it then, yeah.
Now 16 teams don't make the playoffs, and 16 teams do. So what that means is that the 1 versus 8 all those 16 teams are good. Like the reality is, everybody who makes the playoffs is good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really much matter. Like you could say Tampa's harder, but I mean, one year Toronto loses to Montreal. One year, it's like it doesn't really matter. And
but that's essentially what Sidney Crosby said. He said it's not going to matter much, but it'll help a little.
But everyone's
I like, and I, because everybody's good. Just what
I'll tell you what I think would help more. Leave everything that we're talking about alone and go to the 3-2-1 system for points. You do that, you'll have different matchups.
That's true. And,
no, that's right. They don't want to do that, but
one thing that doesn't make any sense. The one thing that I think that they could probably get past easier than this, which would help a little bit, Mike, on what you're saying, would be reseeding in the second round. Like not like the idea of this is, like if there's one really strong division, Toronto has to go through Boston and Tampa. Or Minnesota has to go through Colorado and St. Louis last year. Right. Like that is absolutely 100% the way it's going to be. Where Minnesota, could have played the Central, in the second round, could have played a Central Division team or what have you. That would have been, a lot, or not a Pacific Division team. So
yeah, and don't bring back the crossover because that was a joke.
No, but the reseeding after the first round, I think would be great. I don't think there's really much problem with that because you're only at 16. You're at 8 teams in the playoffs now, right? So at that point, you're down to 8 teams.
That makes the regular season more important because you could keep winning. You might take advantage of your seeding. Every round.
And the other thing, and the last thing I'll say about this, and this is another thing I really feel firmly about, is more. It's more about certain teams versus certain teams than it is certain teams versus how good that team is in the standings. It's like there are some teams just play when you get down to the final 8 in each conference. There are matchups for each team that work and matchups that don't work.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter where they are.
I'm just trying not to be intellectually dishonest. This does not have to do with strictly Tampa versus Toronto. It has to be with the setup the way it is, and I just think it's inherently unfair. Now,
but I mean, how many teams every year is this affecting? I don't think it's affecting that much.
8. It's affecting 8
No,
teams.
it's not.
The way to avoid that is to finish in first in your division. That's what you have to do, and it does make the 2 versus 3 matchup does make the battle for the top more interesting.
Yeah,
because the battle for the top gets the wild card team.
Okay, just to touch on a couple things, and then we'll do our proposed trades. Kev, you said you wanted to talk about the Oilers because you saw.
Well, I did. I saw them live yesterday, and I thought it was interesting. I watched the first 3 minutes of the game, and I said to my colleague, "This feels like a 6-1 Oilers victory," and it ended up 5-2. But they really got it going, and when the Oilers are playing well, they don't need Connor McDavid, which is what happened. They got 3 goals out of their 4th line yesterday, and then they cruised to 5-2. It was a little bit tighter game than it looked because they got an empty net goal, and there was some at the very end. It was 3-2 game going into the third, but they were pretty impressive. And I ended up having a chance to talk to Ken Holland, and I was really I've known him a long time. He's an honest guy with me, and he likes how they're playing. And he said in the beginning, we're really banged up. He said, I kept seeing everybody talking about, well, our goaltending was terrible and this and that. He said, but, to me, I just looked at it and our coaches, and we were just, too banged up. And he said, we're healthy now, and everybody's playing well. And Jack Campbell looked good. Right. Russ sent us some statistics around that he's 8-1 in his last 9. He looked 8-1 in his last 9 last night. The Red Wings had a chance to tie it midway in the third. Berggren, who's a pretty skilled rookie, came down on him, made a nice split glove save that could have been a tie game, and then who knows what could have happened in that. The Red Wings got a lot of shots on him. He looked very confident. I thought their defense looked pretty good too, real feisty. Like the Oilers played a very feisty game and last night. So to me, they're in the West where there's really, we have in the East 2 or 3 teams that I think are pretty darn good. In the West, we don't even know yet who's good. And in that kind of setup, I think the Oilers. Why not the Oilers? I mean, they're pretty decent.
Everything is rolling for them right now, and like I said in our group text, Campbell Russ said he's 8-1, and he's playing like he did in the first 2 months of last season when he was the best goalie in the NHL for the Leafs. And then we saw what he was from December to May, which was not. And I mean, he's hot right now, and they're rolling. You know, you got Zach Hyman in the top 10 of NHL scoring. Let's see at the end of the year. I will patiently wait for, you know, if Jack Campbell stands on his head and they make a run in the playoffs, then deservedly so. I still contend that was a smart move for the Leafs to not sign him to a 5-year deal, because he was in a position to get money that I don't think he's worth.
But we got to stop, Mike. We got to stop talking about him in terms of the Leafs because he's not a Leaf anymore.
No,
I just think, and I'm not trying to. No one's trying to prove you wrong here. Like, no one's trying to prove you. Like, we're just talking about what he's doing on his own.
It always goes back to that, because
I'm not saying.
This time it isn't. This time I just wanted to point out Jack Campbell's a good goalie.
I'm playing what he's playing right now. You know,
after
too many times.
After being a below average goaltender for the first 3 months and then losing his job to Stuart Skinner, he's finally wrested the job away from him, and he's playing the way they expected him to play. If he keeps doing that, they have a chance. Like Kevin says, I mean, the West is wide open with an injury-plagued Colorado team. I like Dallas. I like
that. The below average part, you buried him, and you were like, Jack Campbell's really not that good.
Yeah,
but he has the ability.
Because for 2 years, Russ, when it counted, that's the Jack Campbell that showed up. So
that's not true. You can look at the playoff scores, and you can't hang the Leafs' losses on Jack Campbell.
We have a podcast I can refer to in the past where we talked about how he had a really good beginning of the season, a really bad 3 months in the middle of the season, and a really good last 2 months. We went statistically through all that last year. That's what he did last year. He didn't win in the playoffs, but he didn't play poorly in the playoffs at all. No. We went through all of that stuff. So, but the reality is, like, he's not their goalie anymore, and they chose to go away from him because they didn't think he was the goalie to take him to the next level. That's fine. That's their freedom to do. You know, they could do that. Edmonton has the best goalie they've had. Edmonton in goal is better set up than they've been in a long time.
But I agree.
Those are both of the guys. You know,
that's a fact. That is a fact.
To Kevin's point, though, last night, as he said, their fourth line scored 3 goals. They didn't get any goals out of McDavid and Draisaitl, and I can count on one hand the number of games this year that has happened. Usually it's McDavid and Draisaitl, who are 2 of the best players in the league that carry that team. And for them to have success, they're going to need the Ryan McLeods and the Warren Fogels to score goals at key times for them.
I remember they were without Yamamoto for a while. He's back. So, that backs up the Ken Holland part of it.
You're missing a lot of defensemen. I mean, the whole thing is completely, they are. And when you have 2 of the top 5 players in the league, they are going to carry your team. That's the reality. I mean, it's just like, there's no getting around that. Like, you can't sit back and say, well, we don't want them to carry the team.
Right.
No, it's not that it's not that you don't want them to carry a team. It's that for you to have success, teams are going to focus and try to eliminate McDavid and Draisaitl in the playoffs. And the way you win is for other people to be able to carry the ball every once in a while. Eventually, a team is going to stop 2 players, no matter how great they are.
Yeah, but nobody has eliminated. That's the funny thing. Nobody has eliminated Connor McDavid in the playoffs. Nobody.
Colorado did.
No, they didn't.
Not really.
Yes, they did. I mean, Draisaitl was playing on one leg, but they did control McDavid and Draisaitl in that series. They did.
They controlled them by outscoring them, by getting up there. I mean, they scored so many. They made McDavid and Draisaitl play in their own end more. That's like how they controlled them in that series. It wasn't like they can control them. No one can control them defensively. You can keep the puck in their end, and that's how you control them, right?
And you can pound on them physically, which Colorado did.
Yeah, and I think they are an interesting team. Kevin, have you heard of Puck PR?
One thing is, McDavid had 33 points in 16 playoff games. Nobody controlled him.
Yeah, that's 2 points a game.
What was the question?
What was your question, Nick? I missed it.
Puyarvi. I still feel his name out. I still hear his name out there in the trade market.
Yeah, I think it is out there as well. I just don't know. It's funny that you see so many people defending him too.
Yeah.
I think people want him to have success. I think it's a classic case, don't you, where he needs to change a venue.
In the worst way.
Yeah.
He needs to go. He needs to go someplace where he has some finished players that he likes. Like, I think he really needs to go to a place that has that. Like,
I think Ken Holland handled it right at first, and now I think he's hung around too long.
Well, and I do think it's hard to move him because they want full value for him.
They're not getting full value.
Yeah, and I think that's why he hasn't moved yet.
And
I mean, he used to play on the line with Aho in Carolina. Carolina and Aho, that was a big member. That was
Yeah.
And I wonder about that. Like, I wonder, look at Carolina. And
I don't even know if Brindamore would take him.
I mean, the team that would make a lot of sense for him is Columbus because they have a defenseman like Gavrikov, they have Line A, and they have other Finns there, and maybe with ice time he would benefit from that.
I get the impression that they don't like him there. I mean, you got to go back to remember that they passed on him in the draft. Everything.
All right, maybe there is something Yarmo didn't like. That's true.
Just something about it, and maybe Yarmo knew something about his personality or something. Somebody talked. I get the feeling that he talked to somebody back there and said, "Yeah, this guy's a little weak personality-wise or weak strength-wise."
Yeah, the mental game and the softness was
what you've seen actually in the NHL come to pass, right?
So here's to start with our proposed trade. I think that it would have to be more than
retention,
25% retained to get Elliott from
I think they need more retention.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have to talk to the owner and ask him.
I would need them to retain 99.8% of the Freeman salary to bring him on board.
So let's start with our proposal.
Our viewers are just so on top of things. Like I just love that.
So,
there you go.
Let's start with our proposed trades, and we'll start with Hack with the Philadelphia Flyers.
All right, Tortorella came out. We talked about the letter yesterday. We talked about the whole thing.
No.
They are going to make a move. There's two guys that I think that there's a bunch of guys they could move. But the interesting guys. The interesting guy to me is Travis Sanheim, and I think Travis Sanheim will get moved. And I'm going off the Russ Cohen deal that we talked about before, which I really think Russ is the first one who brought it up as a possibility, but I think it makes so much sense for both teams. I just don't know why it hasn't been explored, So I'm going to keep throwing it out there in the ether, and maybe if it happens, Russ, the Flyers fans will thank you. But I think that Travis Sanheim for Brock Besser is a great deal for both teams, and I think that that's something that the Flyers would be willing to do. They really feel like they need to add some scoring. They need to add some excitement. And then in return, Vancouver gets a hell of a good Western Canadian defenseman in Travis Sanheim. So I think that's a trade I would go with.
And clearly, Vancouver was asking for Brandon Carlo in the Horvat deal with Boston, and if that's the case, they're still looking for that top four defenseman. So okay,
what's the salaries on that exchange?
Besser is 6.65 and Sanheim is 6.5. So pretty much.
Then they're not going to make that trade. Because they're trying to lower their
Flyers could retain salary in the deal.
Right, Flyers are okay.
Because they're not.
How many years does he have left?
Sanheim is an 8-year contract, so I don't know if they would want to retain.
Yeah, I don't think they will either. I don't know. I love the trade, but I don't know. I mean, the Vancouver, the reason they're trading Besser is they have to lower a little bit because they got guys they got to sign. And
partially, I've also talked to people out there who said that they thought it made some sense because they are trying to lower their salary cap, but they're also trying to make their salary cap more balanced throughout the lineup. Sanheim will bring in their defense a little bit.
I get that, but they still got to create some space to sign the other guys. So that's why people thought they would trade Besser for a guy off the roster, maybe making $3 million and then a pick. So
but I think I don't know. With that team wanting to win now, which they always
do. I mean that's fair. I'm just saying that it kind of goes against what they're trying to accomplish. I like to trade though. I would do it on both sides.
Russ, the Columbus Blue Jackets for you.
All right, so I'm gonna have the Columbus Blue Jackets trade Gavrikov to the Rangers. The Rangers are going to sign Gavrikov. That's going to be part of the deal for Adam Sikora, a second this year and a third next year.
I think Yarmo's looking for more than that.
I don't know. I mean,
he probably is, but we'll see where they're at.
No retention. Like Yarmo doesn't have to retain anything. The Rangers have salary space.
Right.
Sikora's 2 years away, maybe even a year away from the NHL. He's doing well in the Slovakian league. He's great in the World Juniors. Like, he's a really good talent, and I think Yarmo would appreciate his talent. In this deal, you're not getting Kakko or Lafreniere. It's not happening.
Would you get Othman, maybe?
No. Not for Gavrikov. That's not happening.
Even if they sign him?
Even if they sign him, it wouldn't happen.
All right.
The second and the third are pretty valuable besides a player who –
he wants a first, but let's see what happens.
Yeah.
As it slides down.
I don't think he's getting a first personally, but we'll see.
Yeah. Maybe it's a conditional one if they go to the conference final.
And I probably agree with that.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah. The Carolina Hurricanes are going to do something. They've got Pacioretty's money. They're going to look at the centers, but I don't think they believe they can get a center because they don't want to pay that big a price for a rental. Okay. We'll see. I think they'll poke their nose and all them, but I think their plan B, and it's probably a good plan B, is to get another scorer. And I think they'll turn to the St. Louis Blues and go after Tarasenko. And I don't think they want to give a first-round pick. I hear that Doug Armstrong wants a lot for him, the same kind of packages you're seeing for other rentals. But I don't see Carolina doing that. I think they'll wait it out, and they'll give up a first to get Tarasenko at the end.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. And they do have some flexibility in terms of guys who can play center. On top of Aho and Stahl, Neckish and Kotkaniemi. They have enough that I think they can get through the year, and if they think that the prices are ridiculous for the O'Reillys or for the other guys, Monahan, etc., right, then that's probably a realistic way to go. Okay, I have the Islanders, and even before I heard Elliot Friedman say they were going to look for a winger, that was the direction they were going to go. I thought they were going to go because I do believe the only way they make the playoffs is if they can add some scoring. And even though this guy is not having a great year this year, he's on the market, and that's Evgeny Dadonov from the Canadiens. I have him going to the Islanders with 50% of his $5 million salary retained for a conditional 2024 second round pick. It could go down to a third, but if they advance or whatever condition you want to put in there, I think that he's a type of guy you could plug in on a second or third line, maybe on the power play, and could add some offense. And I think they need to add that offense to have any success.
Right.
It's a dice roll. I don't know if Lou likes the Dadonov kind of player, but I get what you're doing.
Yeah, and the third, I would make the third round, and if they advance, then it's a second.
Right.
I think Lou would probably love Dadonov, to be honest. I think that's the kind of player that he does tend to add at deadlines.
Yeah, he's 33 years old. You know what you're getting. He scored 20 goals last year with Vegas. He's a veteran. It's not a long-term commitment. It's only for the rest of this year. It's a rental, and he's got skill. Exactly.
And the Islanders need more skill in their offense because they get more skill in their offense that brings out the skill of the other players they have in their offense. So that's what they really need.
Yeah, the only problem is, like the chat room is saying, who is he replacing in the lineup?
Well, yeah, Simon Holmstrom, or some of the guys that are playing right now. Some of the guys who I don't think are. He's definitely an upgrade over some players that they're.
He'd be an upgrade over Holmstrom, sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Eck, the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Penguins are trying to do two things from my talking to people yesterday. They are trying to get a defenseman and then trying to get a goalie.
Yeah.
Goalie.
What you thought.
Yeah, goalie. So I've heard them. My one trade would be for them to go after Anton Hudobin out of Dallas. I think that they bringing in a goalie there who can play in high pressure situations, who's got experience. They're a team that wants to win now. They're ready to win now in their minds. They don't really care where they finish as long as they get in the playoffs, because they feel like once they're in the playoffs, the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs are a different team than the Pittsburgh Penguins in the regular season, and they're right about that. Like last year they were right about that against the Rangers, but Crosby gets hurt. And then their goalies all go down. But, the reality is if they have a Hudobin last year, they might get past the Rangers, even without Crosby. And that's a really interesting, tricky thing. The other thing you're looking at is
so who are they giving up?
It wouldn't be much. It would be like a fourth round pick, third round pick. There's not a whole lot.
Maybe not even that. Dallas would
it would be conditional probably too. Okay. Like Dallas is not using him. Dallas would love to get rid of his money. It's all easy. I don't know how they would make the money work. That's the only question. I don't know.
The advantage with Khudobin is that he's in the AHL, so over $1 million is buried. So if you trade him to Pittsburgh, he could stay. He could basically stay in the AHL
until you get goalies that are hurt, right? So
the only thing I could say that makes it true that it could happen is there would definitely be another trade, and I know that they're trying to trade Kapanen. So if they do that, then they could definitely balance it out.
And that brings up our next guy, Kapanen. And real quick, a second trade on this too, because two guys I heard they're interested in are Joel Edmondson, and Jake McCabe from Chicago. So those two, Jake McCabe, I think it really makes a lot of sense. Maybe for Kapanen,
and he's got term. He's got 2 more years of $4 million.
2 more years at $4 million, and Hextall's come out pretty much, and for Hextall to say it like publicly, like we're going to better our defense at the trade deadline. That's Hextall never says anything like that.
Well, the thing with Pittsburgh right now is that Dumoulin's contract is up at the end of the year, and I don't know if I know he's liked in Pittsburgh, but if they do trade for a defenseman with term, it sort of there is an opening there that they can basically
go in that trade.
Yeah. Kane and Edmondson are both more shut down defense, which is good for them. That's what they need. So anyway, that's my other one.
I think you're right about Hextall wanting to protect the goalies he has in case he doesn't get another one.
Right.
I think that's, make it easier around them. I think that's part of it.
And it's all question, Kev, of what nobody knows right now what's going on with Jari.
No, it's really it's a mystery.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been following it. I can tell you what I've gleaned from that. Before the break, Hextall was like, hey, he's really close. He's going to go on IR, but not for long. I do see he's practicing, and it looks like he's practicing pretty hard. I don't think he's out for more than another week.
Okay. I mean, if that's the case, then you take goaltender, but you have to worry about a recurrence of the injury. And
and it's not like you can't upgrade on Casey Smith or have 3 just in case. Like, it's not like out of the realm.
But you really want a goalie who's been in the playoffs before, and that's where Hudobin comes into play.
Yeah,
I mean, like he comes into play because he was very good, obviously, in his run.
I don't tell you, Tristan Jarry has a Stanley Cup ring. I will also tell you he didn't play in the Stanley Cup. But.
There you go.
But he has a ring.
All right, Russ. The Rangers.
The Rangers. I thought
No, you did Columbus first.
Well, I mean, I did both, though. I did Columbus and the Rangers.
So
I'll do the secondary Rangers one. Hold on.
Yeah.
Mike, why don't you go next first?
Yeah, dude, go. I'll get to the second.
All right, I'll do mine, which is Washington. I believe Washington will be adding a defenseman. Russ and I have talked about maybe them going after Klingberg, but I think Klingberg. I don't think they want to pay the price on Klingberg, and I think Kev, you had Klingberg going to Seattle, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think their fallback would be a guy like Kevin Shattenkirk, who I think Anaheim is going to trade at the deadline. The money would be easier to fit because Klingberg's making, I think, $7 million. So I have Shattenkirk going to the Capitals for a 3rd-round pick.
That happened in other deadlines.
Yes, but the thing is,
I felt like I was doing the time zone there for a second.
The thing is, Carlson is hurt. And we don't know, and they have to have somebody who can be a power play quarterback if Carlson can't carry the ball in that respect. So that's why I think Shattenkirk to the Caps makes sense.
Right. Okay. All right. Interesting.
You got it, Russ?
Yeah, I do. So I have the Rangers sending a 2024 second to Ottawa for Tyler Mott.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little pricey. I think
because I don't think they want to give up their 2nd and 3rd for this year's draft. Yeah. So I think they would give up their 2nd for next year's draft as a result. Right. And I already put conditions on one of those picks, the 2nd or the 3rd in this one. So they'll either have a 1st and a 2nd or a 1st and a 3rd. And I think they can live with that in this draft. But I think they would do it because I also think this is just me saying it. I don't know if they think it. Maybe they would sign Mott this time, realizing that they're missing him, and actually sign him to it.
The 2 guys last year, they got Mott and Kopp. They both have missed both of them.
Yeah, they missed Kopp to some degree. I think Kopp did really well at the start, and then he sort of faded, and I don't think he's really recovered that much where he's playing now.
He's good in Detroit, hasn't he?
He's from Detroit, Kopp.
Yeah, but I mean, how great has Kopp been this year?
Well, he's picked it up lately. He hasn't scored at all.
See, that's the problem with Kopp. Everybody wants him to score more, and so did the Rangers.
Right. Well, he had 20 goals for the first time last year.
Yeah.
But he hasn't scored in Detroit. He's only got a handful of goals. But he has a lot of assists now. He's starting to create, and he's valuable because he can kill penalties. He's a bigger guy. He's He can stand his ground and so forth. I don't think the Red Wings are disappointed in with him, although they are now have joined the list of those who would like to see him score more goals.
And just to answer goalie FP, is this all the Rangers are doing? Like, the Rangers are a really good team. They don't have to do a ton of tinkering, and getting Gavrikov means if Keandre Miller fails, you could put Gavrikov in your second pairing, and if not, you can put him in your third pairing. They need that flexibility because they still have young players on this team in the playoffs, and they need to get back to the conference final.
Similar to Toronto, I think the Rangers are going to be looking for one up front, one on the blue line. It's just a question of what they want to spend more assets to get. Now, the Rangers, I agree. I think they're going to try to upgrade the blue line because I think they have enough depth. With Toronto, I think it's the opposite. I think they have enough depth on D. They'll want to add a depth guy, somebody who's like an 8th or 9th guy. But I think they're going to spend their assets on a forward. Kev, last one is the New Jersey Devils. Everybody seems to think Timo Meier is going.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. I'm going to make a bold move here, and it really makes a lot of sense when you think about it because they're, really about the future. And Meier, of course, the Sharks don't have to trade him. He is going to be a restricted free agent, so they have time if they want to do that. Wow. My trade is dependent upon they can reach an agreement with Meier for an extension. And then it's a big one. They're going to give up a first-round pick in 2023, a second-round pick in 2024, Holtz and Severson, also allowing the Sharks to talk to him as well to see if they can get him.
Right.
And, I think that would be a trade that would benefit both.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the Sharks have not worked harder to get Meier signed, but, apparently that's not going to happen. So
the Sharks, I'll take that deal.
So, yeah.
The Sharks know that Meier's gone. I think
they do seem to understand.
Be very much treating it like that. And I think Meier wants to go to New Jersey too. I've heard that as well. Like I've heard that's interesting, so.
Yeah, and there aren't a lot of teams. I just had this discussion with someone that can afford to take in a player and sign him the way the Devils can. So,
right. Yeah, and the Devils are an attractive team right now.
Yeah, well, and they've got assets too. That's you got to have cap space, you got to have assets, you got to have desire, and they've got all three.
Well, they've got all this. That's a great way to end the show.
I do have an update too. Andrew Mangiapane has 11 goals and 28 points in 51 games. I just want to point that out.
So, Lennart Forsberg in our chat room, who is probably Swedish, because he was talking about Carlson and how he's
Irish to me.
How he's on a 100-point pace. Points out that Holtz and Eklund played together in Sweden.
Yeah.
So that's another thing.
Yeah.
So that's another really big positive about that trade.
You played with Holtz?
Eklund. My son. You know my son. You've met him. He used to play.
Yeah, he's having a pretty good year. Eklund's having a pretty good year in the A. So
yeah, absolutely.
He might be ready next year.
I think so too. He's a very dominant player with a very good name. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will all talk to you on tomorrow. Let's do tomorrow. Thursday.
Thanks.
Tomorrow's Thursday.